Hi folks, my name's Greg and welcome to Oridian Games, a channel dedicated to the tabletop hobby really, RPGs, war games with content ranging from gameplay, GM tips and tricks, various strategies to crafting. And crafting is why we're here today. We're going to be making, in this series, some modular desert tiles for war games generally, but it can also be applied for smaller skirmish maps or RPG terrain. Now, I don't think deserts get enough love. So that's why we're going to do this series. And we're going to begin with 2x2, 2 foot by 2 foot modular desert tiles. So the next videos in this series will involve more of the fun stuff: hills, water features, fissures, laying the sand, desert vegetation. But first, we're going to get through the modular board build. All right, without any further ado, let's get started. So at any large hardware store, there's generally an aisle of pre-machine cut plywood squares and other boards. I'm picking up a 2x2 square of Luan Pine Wood and then an 8-foot board of Whiteboard. And one of each item will be the primary foundation of the board. Then I'm getting some panel foam, some expanded polystyrene. These come in sheets that are 1/3 of an inch. And you can also use blue insulation foam. I just don't have any hot wire tools. Then I'm coming along making, measuring out my cuts. So for this, you're going to be doing 2 2-foot cuts and then 2 1-foot 10-inch cuts. Those 4 pieces will compose the outer edge of each modular tile. Clamp them down using whatever workspace you have. Might not be ideal if you're just getting started in this. I still haven't made a proper workbench. Then I'm coming in with a handsaw and just making those cuts. Whatever mechanical errors you make can be fixed later. Then once all the cuts are made, double check your work by placing them along the outer edge of each tile. This is where they will be fixed in place in a minute. Then I'm taking some Sharpie and drawing a line. This is a guideline for the pilot holes that we'll be drilling in place with a power drill. Taking Gorilla wood glue, placing a small bead along the bottom of each whiteboard plank and setting them in place with hand clamps. We'll be able to fix any potential warping in the whiteboard with these hand clamps, because as you put them in place you can maneuver the board inch by inch so that it aligns perfectly with the machine cut plywood board beneath it. Just make sure it's flush. Use the clamps. I'm just eyeballing everything, and it generally works very well. So just repeat this process with each of your cuts. So this video is going to get pretty boring without some jams. So let's try some, what do I have? Some royalty-free blues. Oh yeah. Now that that's done and the glue's drying and everything's clamped in place, I'm going to take a panel of expanded polystyrene, measure it out so that we can cut it and put it in place. Now you can just use a knife or a box cutter for this. I do have some hot wire tools, so I'm just using that to cut through the foam that way. It's less mess, but it's not entirely necessary if that's not something that you have in your kit. Yes, it actually does turn out that I had one attachment to my hot wire tools that does work, so I am using it. So we're going to be doing 2 layers of the polystyrene sheets. This bottom layer, it's not that important that it fits completely flush with everything. It's just going to be propping up the more important second layer. However, if you are going to be carving out any water features or fissures, which I'm going to be doing in this series, you want to make sure that they're pretty expansive in their coverage and there's not too many holes. I'm putting everything in place and gluing them down with the wood glue, then coming in and starting the screwing process. I'm using wood screws, but whatever screws on hand will work fine as long as they're not longer than the wood you're screwing into. And I'm coming on the back. With the wood glue, they're probably going to stay in place as it is, but I live in Texas, it gets hot and I store them in the garage, so it wreaks havoc on glue, and I'm a nut for security. So I'm going to just go around the board, fixing everything in place. Now, you can see any mechanical manufacturing errors that you've made if your cuts hang over the lip of these machine cut plywood squares. I'm taking a power sander. Now, I highly recommend if you're going to be building any boards of your own to get one. I picked this up a while ago at a pawn shop for $8, and with the 60 grain sanding squares that I picked up at the local hardware store, it put this entire purchase up to about $7.50. And man, this Ryobi power sander really saves my life when I'm making any sort of board. If you don't have that, with a sanding block, some regular sandpaper, and a lot of dedication and determination, you can do that. Now, plywood has a lot of wood fibers, so I'm coming along the bottom of the board and just sanding them out. Now, when that's dry, coming in with a second layer of polystyrene, fitting that in. On top so everything's flush. Then I'm going to fix this in place because I have time to wait while I work on the other boards with PVA glue, which stands for polyvinyl acetate, and I just glued them in with Elmer's. Now I'm coming in with some Spackle, which is joint compound or wall filler if you live in other countries, but in America it's called Spackle. We also have Patching Plaster or Woodland Scenic's Foam It, which is a foam putty. This is used, and we're going to use this to fill up any cracks or empty spaces between the board and the foam. I'm using Spackle for this, or joint compound or wood filler. Taking a putty knife, putting it on off-cut of foam, creating a sort of a spackle palette, and then I'm coming around the edges, just pushing that into place and smoothing it out. Now the spaces in the board itself, in between the foam cuts, make sure you fill those up too, so your ground cover that you're going to apply later doesn't seep into the holes. Any manufacturing errors can be fixed here as well. I just use my finger for the smaller work. Once that's done, I'm doing an extra check to make sure everything is completely flush. I take something that I know to be perfectly straight and look for any gaps in the joins. Coming back in with the power sander, doing some final touches. Now, here we have a clear manufacturing error. There is a slight gap in the corner of the board. You find where the culprit is when you measure all your, place all your boards together. And The best way I've found to fix this is determine where the gap is and then come in with a small layer of spackle or wall compound or wall filler and just start building up small layers, as demonstrated here. You're going to be covering this with a lot of layers of PVA, ground cover, everything. So just even small efforts to fill up the gaps will pan out big time. And this will be more sturdy and stay in place despite whatever misgivings you might have. It'll work. Trust me. When that's done, leave it to dry. When all your boards are made, I ran out of foam and I need to get more, just put them all together, lay them out on the floor, and repeat the process of touching up any manufacturing errors. And I think that about wraps it up. Alright people, well there you have it. Those are the boards. And you can make them with pretty much no carpentry tool experience at all. Very simple and surprisingly intuitive. Just rewatch the video if you need to, and assembling the tools and materials should not be too expensive, really. So, in the next video, we're going to be doing this guy right here, fissures and sand. Alright, catch you next time. Thanks for watching.